Our guest speaker today is Tucson attorney and also Arizona Democratic First Vice Chair Paul Eckerstrom. He was recently elected in tandem with Arizona Democratic Chair Yolanda Bejarano. Paul has previously served the Democratic Party as the Arizona Democratic Party Chair, as well as the Pima County Democratic County Chair. He's been a frequent spokesman for the party and a debate partner butting heads with various Republican pundits and propagandists. Today, he'll be discussing the role of the Democratic National Committee and everything he learned attending the most recent annual Democratic National Committee meeting. Let's give a big, warm DGT welcome to Paul Eckerstrom.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. Yeah, as Joe said, I just attended the Democratic National Committee. First, as you probably are aware, the chair and the first vice chair of all the state parties are automatic members of the Democratic National Committee. And that's the first Democratic National Committee meeting I ever attended. Back when I ran and became chair, I was not able to keep that position I could only keep it for about 2 weeks for personal reasons and for pushback from certain people. I won't name names, except a particular senator who's no longer a Democrat was one of them. And we can understand why now. Anyway, all that being said, this was my first DNC meeting, and I got elected, and thank you all who were state committee people who supported Yolanda Bejarano as chair, because that obviously opened up this first vice chair to a male, because it has to be male, female in those two positions. And I was able to, and I thank everybody who supported Yolanda. And then, of course, me, when I ran for first vice chair, that I won as by acclamation. So there wasn't any opposition. It's the best way to win elections, by the way. Well, and immediately I was told that the DNC meeting was that week. This was Saturday. I had to be out there and make arrangements to fly out on Tuesday. So I cleared my court calendar. I'm a public defender by trade. And so I did that and got out there, and I was really happy to go out there because I learned a lot, quite a bit about certain things. One of the big takeaways is that first day was the Association of State Committee, Democratic Committee committees. And that is an organization within the DNC of all the first vice chairs and executive directors of each state party. And they had incredibly good information for us. The big one was they gave a presentation by a man named Volpe. He's written a book. You probably have seen him on MSNBC talking about Gen Z, the Gen Z generation of young people who were born in 1997 on. And it's pretty amazing information. I've seen him on MSNBC talking about the suicide rates in that generation, but in our case, he was talking about their political proclivities. They are extremely progressive. They make us activists look pretty conservative in if you actually look at what they really support. And he's done a lot of polling data and focus groups with Gen Zers. It basically, things like climate change and air and water pollution, that's their biggest issue, is air and water, which I think kind of dovetails with climate change, which was a separate issue that was like fifth on their list. Gun control was a huge one for them. Obviously, education, but one of the big things was economic justice issues. And then on top of that, one of the very high things is they are extremely tolerant of they don't see race. It's unusual. This group of kids coming up, I think, bodes really well for our future, especially in terms of race relations. They just don't see color. And they accept, obviously gender, and also they're very high on accepting of, the LGBTQ community. They just are a very accepting and tolerant group of a generation. So given that, one of the things you have to really think about as Democratic activists, and they also said they don't necessarily register to vote as Democrats, but they certainly vote for Democrats because they vote their issues, and they vote if they're registering, a lot of them will register as independents, but they're going to vote our way. So given that, our job as activists is get these kids registered. And then the rule of thumb is if you can give them the vote in 2 election cycles, they're going to vote for life. And they'll vote consistently. And so our job, and this was the message that was coming from the DNC, was register these kids 18 to 29. And I call them kids, but they're really adults. Get them registered, and then really do an aggressive get out the vote with the newly registered to make sure they vote. Because once you got them voting, then they'll vote for life. And these are very, very blue voters. And in Arizona, the demographic shifts that are taking place in Arizona, one of which is a lot of the, majority of the school age kids who are starting to graduate into adulthood and being able to register to vote. They're not only liberal because of the progressive issues that they care about, there are also in Arizona, the majority are Hispanic, who are a traditional voting bloc for Democrats. So our job is to register those folks. And that's a lot of hard work. But that was my biggest takeaway from the Democratic National Committee meeting. Couple other things that were really interesting. Yolanda and I went to a lot of these presentations, one of which was how do you recruit candidates, and how do you, especially in very red areas. And all my instincts and Yolanda's organizing instincts told us this. It was all confirmed by a lot of what was said. For example, if you're going to recruit somebody to run in a race that they're highly likely to lose because it's a very red area, you basically have to be upfront with them about that and really talk to them and say, look, you're doing a good service in politics by getting out there and running, getting a democratic message out to an area that doesn't usually hear it, to help persuade people, and also to excite the Democrats who are there that have somebody local to vote for. They'll now come out and vote, and that helps our up ballot candidates. If you talk to people that way, in terms of not kind of blowing smoke, but basically being upfront with them about, hey, you're going to lose this race, but we really need you. And here's the things, the benefits of organizing and helping move your area into being more blue in the future. Then people get it, and a lot of them will do it then. And that's one aspect of candidate recruitment that I felt that you needed to do. I've been told, no, you don't want to scare people off. But no, you got to be upfront with them about it. And then if you're upfront with them about it, they don't feel betrayed when they lose. And then they blame the party or whatever, but they actually feel like they've done something positive even when they lose. And I think that's really important, especially since we do need to recruit candidates in those areas. It does help up ballot candidates in the statewide and the congressional races. And it also helps persuade people over time, if they hear a Democratic message, that maybe they should be voting Democrat. So that was a good takeaway. They also had some really good presentations about how to message about climate, message about the crime issue, because the Republicans went after us really hard on the crime issue. And, you know, that was a good takeaway. I mean, on the crime issue, for example, you know, it's not about defunding the police. We can't do that anyway. But even if you do say it, it's deadly. You will lose your race if you do that. I think we lost the Senate race in Wisconsin because our candidate early on had talked about that issue a little bit, and that was used against him. And that was unfortunate. In reality, what you need to talk about is, you know, police reform in terms of better training and things of that nature is important. But one of the most important things is that police can't do all this work to fight crime. They're just at the back end of fighting crime. You need to fight crime at the front end, which is to fight poverty, to create community in high crime areas. Basically go out there and make sure that if there's mentally ill people being on a call, it's not the police that should be really necessarily taking that call and being the first responder. It should be a social worker or somebody who's works in the mental health field. And if you couch it that way, that the resources that we need additional resources to deal with the issues up front on crime. By the way, one of the reforms they talk about on police reform is making sure that police officers are on the beat in a particular community, whether they live in the community, which is better, but even still, they're not just cruising around in their police car all across town. They actually have a beat in their area. They get out of their police car, they walk it, they get to know the community. Community policing is really important as well in terms of that type of message. So those are the things we were getting at the DNC, and it was really, really valuable. The other thing was there was a couple of really great events. Nancy Pelosi there was a reception for Nancy Pelosi that we participated in, and boy, let me tell you, she's an impressive person. And the reason I say that is because politicians I grade on how much they're in it for themselves or how much they're in it for moving the ball on issues for people. You get the sense from Nancy Pelosi, no matter how well she's done in terms of becoming the most powerful woman ever to hold a seat as Speaker of a House, it really doesn't feel like when she talks, it's really not about her. It's never about her. And she even says it's about the children. That's the way she opens up everything. And that was impressive to me because in person, you really feel that. And that's what impressed me most about Nancy Pelosi. And of course, the next night, we had both Kamala Harris and Joe Biden come to the DNC and give a talk. And that was great to see the president and the vice president. It's very unusual to have them in the same building at the same time for obvious reasons. But they both were there and they both gave a talk, and Kamala Harris then, of course, introduced the president. But one of the things that happened to me while waiting in line for the Pelosi event, there was a Western states caucus, and all the different chairs gave a report about their states. And if anybody knows about the story of Colorado, I've read about it, I've studied it. It's something kind of where Arizona is going. But in 2004, Colorado specifically went after the state legislature and captured it. The Democrats did. And they captured it. And then because of that, they won up ballot candidate races in the Senate and one of the House seats. And in 2006, they took the governor. And in 2008, they took the other Senate seat. And it was pretty much blue, except they had bare majorities in the state legislature. What I didn't know is in the last couple of cycles, they have extended their majorities in both the House and the Senate in their legislature to super majorities. And when I heard that at their report, I was like, I want to talk to that chairperson. Her name is Morgan Carroll. She's not running for re-election in April, but she's been the chair there for 6 years. She had been in the state legislature when they did take over the legislature. So she had a lot of history on this, and I wanted to talk to her, but she got out of the room before I could talk to her. But later I was in line with her at the Nancy Pelosi event and started talking to her. And what they have done is something that we need to start building towards. Is she basically said after taking the legislature and the governorship, they were able to pass good legislation that people liked. And then they could really run on that. But more importantly, they got down to the precinct level where their precinct committee people do two things. First, they're given a goal every election cycle to increase the Democratic vote in their precinct every election cycle. And they seem to meet it. Now, they don't have everything covered, but they have a lot covered. The second thing they do is they go out and walk in the non-election year, like this year in 2023, and then they go to the doors of the people there, and they listen to, they just basically say, if you were king or queen for the day, what would you want to change the most? What do you want to have happen in government the most if you get to decide? And then they just listen. And then they take down what is being said by those voters. And then they upload it into the voter file, the voter van, the van. And when they do that, then in the election cycle, when they go back to those doors, they basically tell those people what Democrats have done on their particular issue that they really care about. And I think that's a incredibly sophisticated, if we could ever get there, program that they do. They also have goals for their legislative district chairs and organizations to increase their vote in their legislative district, and the county as well. The county chairs and the county organizations have their goals, and they seem to meet them every cycle. What's interesting about all of this is, we have an incredible tool, the van, I just mentioned it, at the national level that we participate in. And every time we upload information like that into the van, it's like gold. And it now gives future voter contact information about that voter that we can then leverage into actual messaging to get them to vote our way. One of the things she told me, and this is very interesting, as you know, the crazy Congresswoman Bobbert almost lost in a conservative area of Colorado in the western slope of the Rockies, Grand Junction and environs around. She told me now Colorado has a lot more counties than we do. They had 27 counties in that particular congressional district. They've gotten so good that they know each county has their own local issues a lot of times. And what they did was they micro messaged each county, each locale with a message that went to their local issues that they cared about. And that's why our congressional candidate almost beat Bobbert, and hopefully will get over the top in 2 years, because I believe he's running again. And that's the type of organization that we need to become. And it will take time. It won't be one election cycle. It won't be two. It's probably going to take 3 or 4 election cycles to get there. But if we take the state legislature, which I am totally focused on, it gives us the basis to be able to do that, especially now that we have the governorship. If we can win both houses in 2024, it gives Katie Hobbs the ability to pass good legislation that people will like in this state, and we can start persuading people to vote more Democratic because of that. So that's kind of a synopsis of a lot about what I learned. I will tell you that I have already gotten to talk to Eric Robbins, our chair here, about getting a voter registration program specifically for the 3 legislative districts that we could actually, if we do well in those districts here in Pima County, we could actually flip the legislature from Southern Arizona alone. And that's District 23, which is a Democratic district, goes all the way to Yuma, but comes into San Javier District here in the Tohono Nation generally in Pima County, which we lost 1 House seat to a Republican. And to take it back, a good voter registration program that increases our lead there would be very, very helpful, especially on the To'odom Nation. Second, a District 16, which a lot of it is in Pima County, and it goes up into Pinal County, where we've got one House seat that we flipped. It's about a 2.2 registration disadvantage to Democrats. But the senator there that's fairly popular and not a MAGA Republican is talking about running for the US Senate. If he runs for that, we could maybe run and flip that Senate seat. And in District 17, which is the district, and ADLCC in the state legislative campaign committee has finally realized they made a mistake last time, not really putting resources in there, and they're going to do it this time. But we have a 9% voter registration disadvantage in 17. And if we really put the resources in, there's only one small precinct, Saddlebrook, which is in Pinal County. The rest is in Pima County. It's basically Oro Valley, Marana, and in the Rincon Valley on the east side. If we put really effort into good voter registration in District 17, we can close the gap. We've got 3 MAGA Republicans to run against, and I think we can flip a Senate seat and at least one House seat. And if we do that in 16 and 17 and in 23, we could actually flip both houses from right here in Southern Arizona. And because of that, I've talked to Eric Robbins. He's putting together and will soon unveil it, maybe even at the EC meeting tonight, unveil a voter registration plan that he wants to fundraise for so that we can actually register Gen Zers at the high schools and the junior colleges and the U of A, register on the To'odom Nation, and do a reverse canvas in all these new developments in like Marana and Oro Valley and other places where you can actually go to households that are unregistered and actually register people there, because those are young families in these cookie cutter homes. A lot of them are going to be Democrats or Democrat leaning. So that's kind of what I took from the DNC and brought to Eric, and Eric's really working up a plan to do that, because I think that could make a huge difference. If we take the legislature, I think just like Colorado, we can start moving forward to what Colorado has done and replicate it. Demographics are moving our way. We just need to accelerate those demographic shifts and really take Arizona right now. So I'll stop there and open it up to any questions other people might have.
Okay, so Mike, do you have a question?
Actually, Marie Jensen in the chat room had a question that she wanted to ask. She says, Paul, when recruiting a Democrat to run in a red district that the candidate is likely to lose, what did the DNC say, if anything, about helping that candidate with funding to get the message out? It seems to her that National is not going to give us any money in those cases. And in that case, what is ADP going to do to help those candidates? Hard to run without money.
True. There's two parts to this. One, unlike almost all the other states, we have clean elections. And so if it's a state race, especially in these state legislative races, we had 5 state legislative districts that had 0 candidates, none. And they were very red areas and nobody stepped up to run. But if you do get them stepped up to run, they can qualify for clean elections. The local party activists can get them on the ballot with petitions, get those $5 contributions. And now they have a pot of money to message out a Democratic message. Well, what can the state party do to help support that? My vision would be the biggest need is a treasurer, especially dealing with clean elections. Find a cadre of people that would be willing to be treasurers for candidates like that, and who are trained up on clean elections, and then give them to the candidates as support. Now that takes a little time to build that team up, but that's one thing that the state party could do for them. And then also team them up with a consultant that can help them with the message to get out and how to do it, mail, social media, and particularly what kind of message might resonate, especially after looking at the local area and trying to hook in a local issue with a statewide issue. Those are things we can do for state legislative candidates, which I think is a no-brainer. We've tried in the past, never really got it consistent. Like I said, this last time, 5 districts had no candidates, no House, no Senate. That can be, I think, easily done. As for other races, this is what the Republicans do. This is what I promoted when I was Pima County chair. When I was Pima County chair, I wanted people running in nonpartisan school board races, nonpartisan city council races like in Marana, Oro Valley, and Sarita, to then become candidates. They learn from being a candidate. If they get elected, they learn how to do policy. They get known in their community with name ID. And if it's a nonpartisan race, they're not labeled a D or an R. And if they're in more red areas, then they can run for maybe the state legislature and actually win. That is the way the Republicans have done it nationwide over the past 40, 50 years. That was their plan. And once they take the legislature, most of the states, have redistricting by the legislature. Then they gerrymandered, and then they captured Congress. That's how they did it. When I was county chair, and they were talking about this at the DNC, run people in those nonpartisan races, give them support in the nonpartisan races as best we can. Unfortunately, under Arizona law, a party can't give money to a candidate in a nonpartisan race. They can obviously give them volunteer support. They can obviously tell donors that, hey, maybe we want to support this candidate in Marana so that we can get somebody on the city council there. And then maybe they run for LD 17 in the future, right? We have a good candidate. People know they like them as a city council person. They'll support him as a Democrat, as a state legislative candidate. That's the idea. It actually worked a little bit back in 2003 to 6 when I was a county party chair. We actually supported candidates in Oro Valley and Marana and in Sarita. And we had a number of wins in the city council races there. And one of them in Sarita was Rosanna Gabaldon. And Rosanna will tell you, and I've heard her say it, that really spurred her on, and the help that the county party gave her to win that race, her first foray into politics. She then now is she's a state senator now. That's the way it works. So it's important that the party, we can't maybe give them money, but we certainly can give them volunteer support. We can maybe tell our donors, give this person money, get them running at those levels, because when you do that, you build a bench for candidates in the future for higher office, whether it be state legislature or eventually maybe Congress or something like that. I think that's super important. And that is something I'd like to see the state party delve into more, about how we build our bench as well. So the two things I'm going to be focused on as first vice chair is working hard to flip the state legislature. And I think voter registration this year is the first step in that regard. And the second thing is building a bench for future candidates in the future. And then also finding those candidates in those red legislative districts to run and get them hooked up with a consultant and a treasurer so that they can get a democratic message out. They won't win, but in the future, they can change that area to maybe be more blue. They can help up ballot candidates. And in the long run, that's how Colorado's literally flipping red areas blue. That's why they have a supermajority in the legislature in both houses. You don't do that overnight, but you do that with the hard work at the ground level. My takeaway was, Yolanda and I were running on bottom-up grassroots organizing and making sure we have candidates everywhere we can get them all across the state. And I remember talking to Yolanda after one of these sessions, and we looked at each other and say, is it our imagination, but is everything that we thought was the right way to go is being confirmed by everything that's being told to us here at the Democratic National Committee? And we said, yep, it's being confirmed. Everything our gut told us is being confirmed. And the issue is not necessarily, it shouldn't be top down. We should do the best we can to get the grassroots as much resources as possible to the top. One of the things I know Yolanda is trying to do in our skinny budget for the 2023 election or the year cycle, it's harder to raise money on a non-election year. It's about a $3 million budget that we passed. Now, of course, we have to raise it, but she's got $150,000 there for county parties. And the idea is she would like to make that bigger and, maybe even double it if she can, if we raise the money for it. But she wants to make sure that there's a committee that listens to programs that county parties and maybe even at the LD level have, whether it be voter registration, get out to vote, whatever, a program, and then help fund that program best we can by giving them a grant. There'll be a committee that she's going to set up to oversee that and to follow how they did, get the feedback from the counties, how they did in their program that they had proposed to the state party, as well as the fact, if we can, we're not certain, it's still kind of in discussion, create a situation where we can do matching, where it helps the county party and maybe even an LD, if the LD has a program, to raise money, and we match that money up to, say, $5,000. And that way it helps the LD raise money or the county raise money for their program, as well as getting funding, not just getting a $2,500 check from us. We'll give you $5,000 if you can match it and raise money for your program specifically. And if I think that's the best way to go, but the decision on that has not been made yet. But that is an idea that Jeannie Buell down in Green Valley came up with. She had been the first vice chair for 11 years in Idaho, doing rural, and she's big on rural work and working the rural areas because they get neglected. And if people show
You ready
up
for a
rural
question, Paul? You ready
What's
for
that?
another question?
Oh yeah,
you
sure.
ready
I'm
for
sorry.
another question?
I was running on there.
Yeah, let me just interject here. Thanks for that very comprehensive answer, Paul. We love a good, complete answer. I think I saw Mark Gordon log on here, and my suggestion is that you give Arizona Democratic Legal Professionals Association a mission to recruit and train those treasurers for our clean elections candidates, because currently they have a couple of missions, but they don't have a main one that contributes to the core mission of getting Democrats elected.
Right.
And so that would be an excellent mission for ADELPA.
That's a good idea.
Okay, great. Well, George Beverly, unmute yourself and let's hear your question.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Appreciate the
Yeah.
presentation. I have wanted to push just a little pushback on about the Gen Zs.
Mhm.
You said that they're the reason why they're really progressive when it comes to race relations is because they want to know about history. So I think that should be interjected in that as well.
Mhm.
But my question is what is the organization doing for caucuses and groups to be more involved and also utilize these groups in order to get more people of color to vote?
Yeah, it's a good question, because during COVID, a lot of they're calling them councils now, kind of fell by the wayside because, I know the Progressive Council needs to recertify. So a lot of these councils are kind of not really active because we've been doing Zoom, meetings rather than being at a particular site where you can break out into your caucuses in the morning like we used to. That's been that's a challenge, and I'm not sure how we're going to address that. I know the Progressive Council is trying to recertify and do it, virtually. At some point, I would hope that we could actually go back to in-person meetings, although it's very convenient for people to do these Zoom state party meetings because, if you're in Flagstaff and have to travel to, Tucson, maybe the meeting's in Tucson, that's a long haul, right? So, it's easier to do these meetings virtually for a lot of people, but it does kind of take away from the councils and the caucuses, and we need to somehow jumpstart those so that we can get that input from the different aspects of the party and the different coalition members of the party. You know, in terms of you know, minority groups in terms of getting the vote, getting registered to vote, those are really big. I, for example, suggested to Eric Robbins that when we do these 3 districts, one of the things you have to understand is, like in Tucson, a lot of registration efforts have always been focused on the south side of town, where we have a lot of Democrats who are not registered, right? And a lot of the affiliate groups like Lucha and other groups, they'll go in there and do that for us. The party, I think, should focus on targeted voter registration that is doable and find the people in these other districts that aren't necessarily heavily Democratic districts, because we need them to win and flip the legislature. And that's why I suggested to Eric that he go for a program like that in those 3 particular districts. But one of the districts, you know, is Democratic, and we know the particular constituency, the Tohono Nation, are heavily Democrats, and we just need to get in there and register them because they're low efficacy voters. They don't vote a lot, or they don't register a lot. And if we can do that, we have a county recorder who is from the nation. And if we can get in there, I told Eric, is you hire a field organizer for this program, one of them has to be from the Tohono Nation, because it has to be member to member in that community. And so those are the type of things I look at when we're reaching out to a minority community, especially Native American, but it goes for any community. You get a person from that community reaching out to another person in that community to get them to vote. That's the best way to do it.
Wonderful. Lori Cinnamon, would you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hey, thank you. Thank you, Paul, for being here. I kind of feel like I'm on Jeopardy. I have to put my response in the form of a question. So I'm going to try to put in a question.
Okay.
So Paul, we all want to flip the legislature. It's really important. And I've heard you talk about, helping up ballot candidates, and we can lose and still win.
Mm-hmm.
But I have heard a couple of stories, real true life stories recently. One was a state legislature candidate, and one was a congressperson from Wisconsin who had no chance of winning whatsoever, registers. But because of circumstances, for example, in the congressional race, it was a wave, and in the legislative race in Idaho, there was a scandal right before the election.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So here is my question. Do you think it is possible in a no-win situation to win because of these unforeseen circumstances?
Absolutely. One of the reasons, even though we have a 9% disadvantage in LD 17, that is a similar area that we won in a Senate race and a House race in District 20, the old District 26 in 2006. And I know this because my fiance, Charlene Pesqueda, was the senator who won against Al Melvin, who was a far-right candidate. It depends on who your opposition is. You can win in areas like that if they put up really, really far to the right, wacky people, which they did in the LD 17. That's why we came so close, even though there was no resources put in by the ADLCC in those races. We almost won a House. We almost won the Senate race. That is a doable 9%. Remember, in District 20, the old District 26, which was the same area, it was a 10.5% disadvantage, and we still won in 2006. These people in District 17 are much worse, okay, in terms of their politics than even Al Melvin was. So we certainly have a real possibility there with only a 9% disadvantage. I would like to squeeze that 9% disadvantage downward to be a lot closer. But in the really red areas, you're absolutely right. If you have a candidate, lightning can strike, because the opposition candidate, sometimes they die. Sometimes they, get into a really bad scandal. Look at Doug Jones in Alabama. Who he was up against. That guy was terrible. And Doug Jones squeaked out a Senate race that he had no business winning in very, very red Alabama, right? So yes, if we don't have a candidate, we don't win. That's a certainty. So that's another aspect of making sure we run people, because yes, lightning can strike, and sometimes we can win that just because of circumstances.
Okay, we have a question from Vivian Hard. Unmute yourself and please ask.
Hi, Paul. Nice
Hey,
to see you
Vivian.
again. Paul and I used to work in the same law office many years ago.
Yeah. And you worked at the county party when I was chair.
That's right. That's exactly right. I have two short comments. The first is in LD 16. I'm in LD 16, and we flipped we had one person run for the House, Mr. Seaman, who flipped that seat from Republican to Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
I would request that you also consider getting a second House candidate for LD 16, not only someone running for the Senate, but also a second House candidate. And the second comment that I have is that I'm in the League of Women Voters and have been for years. And the League has gone to a number of high schools to register students. And what we found was that it was much more effective to go into a government class and teach those students how to register their fellow students, rather than us trying to, us old ladies trying to register them.
Right.
And it's exactly like what you were saying with the Tohono O'odham Nation. You get the students registering each other, much more likely those students are going to register to vote. So when you go and have the meeting with Eric Robbins, my suggestion is to talk to him about how that can happen.
That makes total sense to me. I appreciate that, Vivian. And in terms of 16 and a second House race, and also 17, I think the second House race, we should have two candidates there as well. Although ADLCC is super focused on one-shotting in the House in races like that. That's a problem. Although LD 16 is only a 2.2% disadvantage, unlike 17. And I think there's certainly the ability, although in 17, we have two House people who are very, very, very far right and crazy. And that makes them vulnerable. And I think that's why we should get another candidate. But ADLCC drives a lot of this, and that's going to be hard to deal with because, they threaten to pull out funding and things like that if it's going to be two candidates rather than one. I don't know how to get around that. One, the party doesn't really control trying to keep out people. So if somebody wants to run, there's nothing we can do about it, right? Nothing the ADLCC can do about it either. So understand that. I mean, we only have so much control about who runs. And that's basically by suggestion, right? We don't have any legal way to keep people from running. The other thing is, but I like your idea about making sure you go into government classes and recruiting students there to actually table for registration. I think that's a brilliant idea. I'll bring that to Eric's attention.
Well, not only table, but to go to other classrooms.
Yes.
That's what the League had them do.
Yes. That sounds great.
All right.
Okay, Lee Oler, you have a question. You need to unmute yourself and ask your question.
What Laurie just said about, I think it was Idaho, or somebody said something about Idaho. And I had been watching the Colorado race up there in Grand Junction very closely because I was in the hospital for 3 weeks in Grand Junction last fall in August. And of course, I picked up a lot of the scuttlebutt on what was going on there. Paul, it takes 50 Ds, good Ds in the Senate to actually get something passed or a tie. 51 or 2 would be better. But are there a lot of people watching other races in the United States other than Arizona? I mean, that that are living in Arizona, because I watched that one. I watched Colorado very carefully. 4 years ago, I watched the Montana race. Bullock, I think his name was. He lost for Senate. But I mean, I sent him money, and then we were sending letters for the Georgia race for the fellow who won, that I can't remember his name right now.
Warnock.
Is there a lot of activity from Arizona to help out other races that might be a little closer than what, because we already had our two so-called Democratic senators here.
Yeah, well, in this next election cycle, as you know,
Yes,
Ruben Gallego is running
yes,
as a Democrat. Sinema
Yes.
has now become an independent. All the polls show that she's a distant third in any polling data that is coming out. I hope she doesn't run again, but we're going to have a Donnybrook here again. I mean,
Yeah.
Ruben running, we need to get that seat and hold it. You know, there's a lot of we're going to have a hard time holding the Senate. If you look across the map, you know, John Tester is up in Montana. There's Manchin is up in West Virginia. You know, there's a number of races that we have to defend, and there isn't a lot of potential pickups. So if we're going to hold that bare majority, we got to win here in Arizona.
oh yeah,
So
I think we will.
my focus would be on Ruben, but yeah, I mean, look at Yolanda. You know, she's the national field director for the CWA union, and she actually went out to Georgia and helped organize walks for Warnock in the special election. I mean, in the runoff election.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, I gave money to Warnock. I think a lot of people gave money to Warnock from Arizona. But yeah, I mean, I think it's more important that because we're a battleground state, that the party keeps its focus on here.
Sure.
And I think specifically in this cycle, the focus on the legislature makes all the sense in the world, because one, we can flip it, and two, we have a governor already, and we can pass good legislation if we do, which sets us up for more electoral wins. But also, if we win the legislature, like what happened in Colorado in 2004, it helps up ballot. It helps our Senate candidate. It helps our congressional candidates. I'm telling you right now that I think we made a mistake by not putting resources in District 17, because that would have helped Kirsten Engel, who was very close of winning.
Yes.
If there had been resources put into District 7 LD 17 races last time. And this time I'm hopeful, because they are focused on LD 17, that Kirsten Engel can, if she runs again, which I hear she's thinking of doing, that would help her unseat Siscomani because of just an up ballot synergy that takes place.
That'd be great. Okay. I wondered if I was the only one doing all that stuff. And I'm so glad that you said Yolanda went to Georgia and organized this stuff. And yeah, actually I went to Socorro when Obama was Socorro, New Mexico, and helped out there, because I figured if Pima County couldn't do it over here, they don't need me. But they did it. So I really think if people have the interest to reach out to other states, you know, 50's 50. We don't care where they come from sometimes.
Yep, right.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Very
Paul.
good. Thank you so much. Larry Bodine, you have a question.
Yes, Paul, I had one question for you.
Yeah.
And that is, as the chair of LD18, I'm very interested in presenting speakers who can address the issues of interest to members of Generation Z. I would also love to have a speaker who is from Generation Z. Where can I find speakers like that who are, you know, in Generation Z and can talk to the issues they are interested in?
Well, I'm sure there's some political science majors at the University of Arizona, right? Is maybe one place to look, and there are Gen Zers, but the presentation was done by this, I don't think it was John Volpe, but I forget his first name, Volpe, and he's written a book about it, about Gen Z. If you could get him, he'd be great, but I'm not sure you could get him. But you know, somebody who is looking at this type of data to talk about it, I want to get his book and read it. And I haven't had a chance to do that yet. But I'm gonna order that book and I'm gonna read it cover to cover, because I think it bodes really well for the future of our party. And the more that we can incorporate young folks from the U of A, from Pima College, from the high schools, and get them involved as activists in the party, that will help us. Like Vivian said, you know, a person from that generation talking to somebody else from that generation is much more persuasive than me talking to them, right? So I would suggest that, you know, there is a Young Democrats chapter at the U of A. I'm not so sure how active they are, but maybe you can get the president of the Young Democrats on U of A to come and talk and just give and then maybe, you know, if we give them some of the information that we were presented at the DNC, they can talk specifically from their gut about those issues. And I think that's probably the best way to do it.
Well, yeah, Paul, and on that note, if you'd be willing to, and you might already have it, have an outline of the things and issues and ideas from the Democratic National Committee meeting, we'll be glad to post it to our weekly newsletter.
Yeah, actually, you know, Ken Martin, who's the president of the ASDC, who's going to be coming to our brunch. I asked him for Carol Schloff asked me to get a speaker, and Ken is the head of, he's the chair of the Minnesota Democratic Farm Labor Party, and he's also the chair of the entire ASDC, which is the state committee, the state chairs and first vice chairs organization, and he's a first vice chair at the DNC. He's coming to speak with us on April 16th at the brunch. So everybody should go at the Desert Diamond Casino at 10 a.m. He's a great speaker, and he also he emailed out, and I've got it. I can email it to you, the actual PowerPoint presentation by Volpe on the Gen Z.
That'd be wonderful.
Yeah.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah.
You know, Paul, if you haven't had a chance and, you know, you've been busy and you've been answering questions, and we all find your responses to have been so refreshing. There's so many great ideas. I, for one, feel very hopeful that we can accomplish all we set out to in the next couple election cycles. Yep. Would you might want to put any contact information in the chat room?
Sure.
So folks can take a look at it.
I'm putting my contact information if whoever wants that PowerPoint from Volpe on Gen Zers, just email me an email address. I'll send it out.
Okay, great. Well, lastly, I would like to close our meeting today with a quote from one of our top feminists, Democrats. "The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams." And that was a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt.